Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 1,000 Minutes of Listening podcast, rated 5 stars on iTunes by Nicholas Breton, who states, "This is the perfect thing to go put on whilst I do my chores." Well, thank you, Nicholas. Truly means a lot. I'm sure you really wrote that on iTunes. Nonetheless, today I want to tell a bit of a story relating to 100 Years of Solitude and its stunning similarities to real life told by Gabriel Marquez. Now, the Banana Company in Macondo is your standard run-of-the-mill banana company. Well, what is a run-of-the-mill banana company in your eyes, Luke, you may ask? Well, in my eyes, it's a run-of-the-mill company, period. What a company does is its higher execs strive to make every little dime off of every little person in every little way they can, no matter the injustices they have to go through. There's been countless examples of such things, such as the Rockstar Company or Amazon. Go on and on. That's not the point. Within this company, there lay two spokesmen, Mr. Herbert and Mr. Brown. Now, Mr. Herbert is a good cop kind of guy in this situation, if you will. Mr. Herbert, he really only brings the positives to the table. He tells the workers nothing but the good things that may come. He is the representative of the company that's meant to bring the morale up. He's not meant to be there to destroy anybody's emotions or feelings or anything, or just completely disintegrate their morale. He's the one that has to boost it all up. And then lies the antithesis to Mr. Herbert, Mr. Brown. Now, Mr. Brown is a funny fella, you'll see. As Mr. Brown is a bit of a bad cop, if you will. That given, if a bad cop is a bit of an understatement. You see, Mr. Brown feels that the best way to take action is to simply do and not to think. And he believes that the best course of action to take is often the shortest, quickest, and cheapest. Now, what essentially Mr. Brown is in this case is the true face to Mr. Herbert. In fact, I'm willing to go as far as to say that Mr. Herbert and Mr. Brown are in the end the same person. It's simply that Mr. Herbert is the side that's revealed to the public, while Mr. Brown is the true underlying demon of Mr. Herbert. He's the true fiery soul beneath that bland, rather happy mask. Nonetheless, in the town of Macondo, all the banana workers are severely underpaid and overworked, and they demand compensation for their actions. They want better pay, as stated. So they propose a strike. The workers of the banana company all band together and they protest for better pay. So, how does Mr. Brown respond? Well, Mr. Brown orders a militia to aim and fire at the crowd of protesters until there are none left. So, that's exactly what happens. The militia unleashes fire upon 3,000 workers in the blink of an eye. And all but one survives, Jose Arcadio Segundo. Now, Jose Arcadio Segundo lives to tell his tale to all the townsfolk and all the other workers, the new workers of the banana company. However, Segundo's, panicked shrieks and squeals of terror trying to tell the townsfolk what happened goes unnoticed by all. Even though they all saw it, well, this is because of the plague, the insomnia plague. They all forgot that it happened. It's as if it never even happened in the first place. And this kind of sets Jose Arcadio Segundo a little mad, and he ends up hiding out in the gypsy's stable there, reciting tomes and scriptures and such for a while. But the theme, the message is that this company took advantage of its workers. And it did so, and the public didn't even bat an eye in the end. And for a while, I thought that that was the whole story. I thought that was the whole thing. I thought that was a great little theme, a great message to send out. And I thought I just ended there. However, I did some more research, And what I uncovered is actually quite phenomenal. You see, I originally didn't see a whole point or reason to include this whole, um, I guess, little story arc within the actual novel. I didn't see the point of it. However, once I did the research, it turns out Gabriel Marquez um, actually lived in an era during a time where a banana company in 1928 by the name of the United Fruit Company actually massacred its own workers because of this reason. You see, in 1928, there was a series of strikes and protests going on regarding working conditions for the workers of the United Fruit Company. And Gabriel Marquez was living in this era and was, I guess, kind of like a neutral witness to this event. What ended up happening was on December 7th of 1928, the banana company actually got, well, the United Fruit Company, if you will, actually got a militia to unleash fire on all the strikers and protesters. And if I may now just read you a telegram from the United States Department to the state of Santa Cruz from the state, it goes as follows. The situation outside Santa Marta City unquestionably very serious. Outside zone is in revolt. Military who have orders not to spare ammunition have already killed and wounded 50 strikers. Government now talks of general offensive against strikers as soon as all troop ships now on the way arrive early next week. Again, that was dated to December the 8th, 1928. And it's quite actually fascinating how this all played out, I guess, because as it turns out, the United Banana Company is actually still around to this very day, believe it or not. However, after Gabriel Marquez published his book, 100 Years in Solitude, they had to publicly change their name to Chiquita so as to save face, which is likely why you don't hear much about this nowadays from this company. And I find it truly spectacular how all of this kind of flies under the radar as it did in the book. And to be honest, what happened in the book and in real life isn't an uncommon occurrence. Maybe without all the, gun shooting and violence, but nonetheless, this type of thing plays out all the time on a much smaller scale. I mean, just a few years ago, it was uncovered that Nestle had used slaves in Africa or something along those lines. Amazon, though, has recently been getting a lot of flack for the way it treats its workers and it's been trying to really save face with these, public ad campaigns showing them all with smiles. I know Tesla had some issues, Rockstar North had some issues. This isn't a very uncommon thing. However, it's becoming clear that sometimes to bring these things to light, you must really put them out to the public, right, on a grandiose scale, such as a book such as this. And honestly, it's just so fascinating. I love things like this because they really show true human nature. When you strip away a human of all moral dignity, you end up with this, which is a big corporation just trying to get money. And you may think this may never happen to you, or I would never do such a thing. It's kind of difficult to judge as we've never been in a position where we have this much power over people, this much money, this and that. So it's quite interesting to see every occurrence of it ever happening. It's a big issue in Japan, I know as well, where a lot of workers are severely underpaid by the executives in the companies as well. And it's beautiful how it plays out in the book as well, because Gabriel Marquez is able to set up the narrative that this insomnia plague that clears people's, memories is why the public forgets. It's because, in a way, in our everyday lives, we are constantly just putting things on the back burner. We're constantly forgetting about recent events. And this is quite present in daily culture in the most common form, with how we often forget how some, real role models, celebrities pass away every now and then. And obviously, it's difficult to grasp at first. Stephen Hawking, for instance, or most recently, Florian Schneider of Kraftwerk. He passed away on April 30th. which is a real shame since I used to listen to and still do to a lot of craft work, and he was a personal inspiration of mine. Well, maybe not inspiration, but hero. And these celebrities, whenever they die, it's always so sad, but it seems like the public always forgets very quickly. There's a few very, key exceptions, although this is mostly with bigger events rather than just a singular person. However, the public seems to always just put this stuff on the back burner, forget, like I stated, that some of these things ever even happened. And this is more often than not the downfall of the future generations or people. You of course, one person's death isn't going to change a whole series of events. However, I'm talking about a larger, bigger scale things. I suppose Sandy Hook is a good example of how something can change the future for the better. There's been a lot of activism ever since Sandy Hook happened. However, many smaller events such as, well, the massacre, the Banana Massacre, go under the radar. The I'm sure in a few months or a few years we'll forget all about the Amazon scandal and how they treated their workers. I mean, people are already forgetting. Nobody remembers all of a sudden. It's as if we all have this insomnia plague. And the only thing I can do to explain this, like I said only earlier, is it's just our daily culture. It's how we live our in and out lives. It's just society's always moving along. If you've ever been on the streets of New York City or Manhattan, you'll notice everybody's always going somewhere with haste. There's such a fast pace to the world. Things are being developed every day, quickly, in and out. And there's not much you can do about that. And sadly, a lot of events simply cannot keep up with the mainstream. And it seems like most organizations or people would rather make a hit case on a single person rather, quickly and forget about it within, a few weeks once the damage has been done. And even if they are wrong in the end, as long as they got the attention that they wanted, that's all they care about. A lot of people's lives have been ruined by this, which is a real shame. But it's just how society is nowadays. Hope you enjoyed that eerie little train there. Perfect timing, I suppose. Now, post massacre is the Great Deluge of sorts. It's simply a reign that lasts 4 years and several months, nearly 5 years. And essentially, this reign just simply eats away at all the homes and buildings. And, originally it's not a big deal. However, of course, this being, fantasy magic and all, and it lasting nearly 5 years, it's going to do some damage, and in the end, it does. And honestly, I feel that this is kind of a metaphor where even though this isn't directly linked to the Banana Massacre, it's almost as if, one event just comes after the other in such a perfect manner that it couldn't be better. And I feel like in the real world, this does happen. Events often lead to other events, kind of like a butterfly effect type deal. And even though it may not seem like they're linked, there's always some kind of underlying cause. And in the end, it's because of that. It's the aftermath that nobody would have ever guessed in the end. Nobody would have guessed there'd be a rain for 4 months. I mean, of course, some had premonitions. However, that's not the point really, because in the end, it does come. And with a lot of things in real life, I mean, if you'd like to make this cliched in a way, you could say that in the late 1800s, when we were going through the Industrial Revolution, we didn't expect it to lead to where it does now. I mean, of course, that's a very clear linkage between the two. However, it still stands where back then we really truly didn't think that all these vapors and all the CO2 building up in the atmosphere and eroding slowly at the ozone layer would actually cause any issues because we didn't really know. We didn't have the information. And even though there is, once again, no link in the book between the Banana Company and the rain The fact that it comes directly after, I feel, is a strong enough connection for it to be justified to me personally. Because I'm a believer that things don't just happen for no reason. And even if it's like a sign from God within the book or whatever it is, it's a strong enough case for me to put it to rest. Nonetheless, it is what it is, as it always is. Um, and I just thought I'd highlight that rather interesting detail regarding real life to you, whoever's listening, as it's truly very neat. I never knew that this banana company I used to buy from, I'm probably not going to anymore. I just don't really like the idea of buying a bunch of bananas from some guys who massacred a bunch of people because of pay. Um, However, nonetheless, it's very interesting, fascinating. I highly suggest you read up on the massacre. You could simply Google banana massacre, it'll come up. And the parallels shared are so interesting. Even the how in the book Segundo escaped, even in real life, a man escaped by the name of Luis Vincent Gamez. He was apparently, according to this website, Gamez hid under a bridge for 3 days before coming out with a story and such. And it's just it's interesting. I highly suggest you read up on it. Nonetheless, this has been the 1,000 Minutes of Listening podcast. And like always, I am very happy you could spend 1,000 seconds with me today. I'd like to wish you a very nice evening and have a very nice day. Good night.